According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the southern region of the United States makes up roughly 40% of the U.S. population, but accounts for 45% of all people living with HIV in the country, and 51% of new diagnoses, more than any other region. Pew Research reports that Black Americans are the most religious racial ethnic group in the U.S. This includes Black lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex or asexual, and persons living with HIV/AIDS in the South who rely on their personal faith to navigate issues around health and wellness, but sometimes lack the support to safely explore the intersection between HIV and faith in their community. In partnership with Wake Forest University Gilead Campus Initiative, Southern AIDS Coalition, RAMA, the United States Conference on HIV Faith Coalition, and National Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, we invite you into a safe space for storytelling, where advocates, faith leaders, and people living with HIV address the challenges inherent in responding to the HIV epidemic in the southern U.S. as people and communities of faith. This is My Faith, My Story.
His name is Abdul Alim Fahim Hassan, born in 1951 to parents who were heroin addicts. As a child growing up in that environment, he began using drugs at the age of 14. At 16, he started using heroin. By the time he was 25, he was a full-fledged addict that was in and out of prison. While doing a 12-year sentence, he learned he was HIV positive from using needles. He also embraced Islam, but he still had problems getting off heroin once released. He began to read and study everything he could on HIV. The doctor told him in 1994 he had about 5 years to live. In his heart, he knew better because of his faith. He felt like HIV was a blessing to him because it allowed him the opportunity to take a deep look into himself, even though he knew he didn't have the coping skills to live out there on his own. So he made a conscious decision to get help. He checked into the Ebony House Rehab Center to assist him with his drug and mental health problems. He graduated in 3 months and was blessed with a job in the outreach department for HIV. Praise God that this changed his whole life. As an HIV positive man and a Muslim, now it's about helping others to overcome the stigma and shame and to be able to teach, educate, and inform others that HIV is not a death sentence. You have to take care of yourself and love God who created us. He hopes his story helps someone to live their life in the service of helping others. May God bless us all with peace and success in this life and the next. Amen.
My name is Imara Kennedy, and I am a member of the Baha'i Faith, and also happen to work for a global nonprofit that focuses on addressing HIV and AIDS across our globe.
Hi, I am Chelsea Holland. I'm from Greenwich, Alabama. I'm working with Alabama Department of Public Health in the Office of HIV Prevention and Care. I am an Ending the HIV Epidemic Coordinator.
So I'm William Torres Fuentes. I'm originally from Puerto Rico and currently live in North Carolina.
My name is Shirley Salvage. I work at UAB 1917 Clinic as a coordinator of health education, and I am here to reduce the stigma and talk about what's going on in the South.
Karen Stanley, South Carolina.
Hi, Christopher Hamlin. I serve as chaplain provincial education specialist at UAB's 1917 Clinic and also serve as pastor at Tabernacle Baptist Church here in Birmingham, Alabama.
My name is Jimmy Gibbs. I'm an ordained pastor in the United Church of Christ.
Carmarian D. Anderson-Harvey. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I serve as the co-minister for the National Office of Trans Saints of Affirming Ministries under the Prelate Bishop Yvette Flunder of TFAM. I also serve as the senior staffer, Alabama State Director for the Human Rights Campaign.
So my HIV story began, I was diagnosed in 2003. It was a very dramatic experience.
I'm from a very small community, rural community, population about 1,500. I was diagnosed with HIV in 98. So I've been living with HIV for 22 years now.
I found out in Puerto Rico. Coming from a Latino family, it was a huge shock for them.
So I remember when I, it disclosed my diagnosis to my grandmother, she said, we're going to get the pastor. We're going to get the pastor. He's going to come and pray for you. And he didn't come. He was like, we're going to pray for her. She needs to stay at home. We'll pray from her from afar.
I've been alienated because the pastor would say that you're not, welcome, or we don't discuss that around in here because we don't want people to be afraid of catching anything.
I am a fourth-generation pastor. I knew going into the United Church of Christ and the Christian church, I knew that they were not open, affirming, and accepting.
So I developed fever. I felt that within the time of developing what we would call an acute HIV infection. And so 2 weeks later, I bought the home kit to check for HIV and tested positive. I called my physician and informed him of the results, which were confirmed since then. So I was diagnosed pretty early. I knew when I was exposed. And from there on, I've been taking anti-HIV medications.
Do you feel that faith is important to someone living with HIV, for them to have a healthy and thriving life?
Absolutely. I really like to think of it as the work that we're doing around health and wellness. And wellness encompasses the whole being. So if we are only looking at how we can address one aspect of the whole being, then it still means that there's fragmentation in the totality of the health and wellness of the whole being.
Faith to my HIV diagnosis is very important because, I have to lean on my faith to, to get me from point A to point B, because there are several different diagnoses that have come along since my diagnosis of HIV, even with my faith. I've come into mental health depression. There's been even stroke issues. There have been issues of people thinking that I didn't need to disclose my status.
Well, I came to the 1917 clinic in 2002 with the express purpose of talking with pastors about what we can do to alleviate stigma as it relates to HIV and how we can be a more opening community to members of our congregation who probably were HIV positive, but because of stories similar to Shirley's, you had members who did not want to share or disclose their status for fear of being judged or even being put out of a congregation.
Share with us just a little bit about your thoughts around stigma and self-stigma.
So stigma for me, it's something that I live daily. And moving from Puerto Rico to North Carolina was a huge difference for me. For example, when I came to North Carolina, someone knocked on my door and from the health department asking, hey, you came to North Carolina, we have laws here in North Carolina, and we keep track of people with HIV, and that for me, that was kind of stigmatizing. We don't have that laws anymore in North Carolina, but I feel like I was doing something wrong, that I need to be kept guarded. And till this day, a lot of people feel like that, and that's why they don't get tested or they don't share their status.
I've learned that since I was diagnosed, that with my HIV in several different churches and faith-based organizations, that they're stigmatized and that they don't allow or tolerate people, or you can't even disclose and tell people your HIV status because they will shut you out.
So I didn't share my diagnosis until 2014. So I was isolated. I isolated myself from even going to school or getting into relationships. I mean, I isolate myself. I didn't want to talk about HIV. If I seen it on the TV or in a commercial, I would turn the channel.
My faith in the church was like, I was trying to find to where I could be accepted and would be accepted. And, you know, the what ifs come up. What if happens when they find out your status and they're not going to want you there?
I grew up in a different country where we keep lots of things private, and certainly our HIV status. And that can protect us to a certain way, but it can prevent us from being authentic, and it may harm us in many other ways. I've struggled with being authentic much of my adult life because of that way of upbringing. And I wish that I were a little bit more open and more authentic with people.
That really made me feel like that, you know, the church didn't, a place where you could always go for healing and prayers, that I wasn't accepted there anymore. And so I didn't go to church for a while. And it wasn't until probably about 3 years ago, I think, that I realized that I was really angry with pastors. I didn't like, I always find something wrong with them. And I'm like, okay, he's not going to accept me. So, and every time I would try to go to church, you know, they would say, you just tell us all your problems and tell us, you know, your secrets. And I'm like, really? So that you can put me out?
As a hospital chaplain who dealt with people who lived with cancer, stigma is stigma. I've dealt with stigma with my mom, who just recently died with COVID with her roommate. It doesn't have to be HIV for stigma to come into your life and into your family and into your lives. But we as people of faith are all joined together now on this earth to deal with stigma of all kinds.
It's been a struggle dealing with that. You know, I know I'm a religious person and I am a Christian, and I just believe, you know, I can get my praise and worship at home if need be, but, you know, I still wish that, you know, I would have got accepted.
As a Muslim, the most important aspect of being a Muslim is to be open to helping people have a better and stronger relationship with God, and having a hostile atmosphere that is unwelcome is contrary to that message.
And a lot of times, you know, people really want somebody to talk to. They want to share their information, but they want to be able to trust that if they're giving this information to someone, and that they can really trust them with their heart.
The essence of what I really hear from my brothers and sisters that are living with HIV is just wanting to be loved, wanting to be honored, wanting to be respected, and wanting to be seen for who they are and not the virus that they're living with.
With my HIV status, I've been able to disclose to church members when, you know, I'm participating in church. Sometimes the look is of sadness because they don't understand how far we have come with medication and that we can live a normal life. And that's one of my goals, is to let them know, especially in the Latino community, that there's medication, that people should get tested, know their status, and live a healthy life.
When I came, to Birmingham in 1990, a lot of people were dying from HIV and AIDS-related causes. That doesn't happen now. I mean, the vast majority of people who contract HIV today, they're going to live to be old persons. And that, again, talks about how much progress has been made in this community because of science, because of research, because of healthcare providers and workers, and everyone else who's across the spectrum who have given themselves to educating the community about HIV.
We do have medications that one can take to prevent having HIV. Yeah, so that is becoming part of one of my important messages to congregate.
When the need comes, how do we insert that, you know, in such a traditional structure of a tabernacle? Well, there's always opportunities such as Sunday school, Bible studies, pastoral care, pastoral teachings, which is generally traditional in the South, somewhere between Thursday and Friday. There are opportunities. I mean, even how we as the persons of the gospel preaching a text, there are plenty of texts that we can incorporate to help reduce HIV. Sexually transmitted infections is a taboo in the Black church.
That is a message for me as a physician when I'm talking to medical students or residents, not to stigmatize their patients and whatever it is that they are looking into, because the society stigmatizes for many reasons.
Although you may think this is not happening in your congregation, based on what I was seeing at our clinic and in the community, this is what is in your congregation. And to be aware that you have members who have needs, but you cannot meet those needs, or the congregation cannot meet those needs, basically because of stereotypes, because of judgment, because of stigma. And people who live with HIV had legitimate spiritual needs. They needed to belong to a congregation. They needed to participate in various ministries within those churches.
Being known and letting other people know that I'm living with HIV and that I'm healthy and that I'm able to worship and to love other people, that's what kept me going.
Oftentimes, a silent voice feels like that there is nobody else that's around. And so what we see is that we see high rates of suicide. We see sexual transmitted infections increasing in Black church, and specifically speaking about the Black church, because that's important. And what happens is that they die alone because we're not talking about it, because I heard the word, we cover it up.
I do worry about, I think now we can prevent HIV. The problem with HIV is it stigma that makes people not be open about their sexual life, and therefore makes them less aware of resources, preventive measures that can protect them.
While we're here on earth, it's our responsibility to resurrect people. And that means that we have to talk about HIV.
Our space is a faith institution. It's not good enough just to be a house of worship. That it needs to be a safe space that people from all backgrounds, no matter what their journey, no matter what their life experience, feel that they can come and get what they need.
We need to have support groups and even different churches and stuff to where we can reach out for community resources.
Building community engagement, we have to continue to do the work that all of us are called to do. Ministers are not the only ones that are called to do this sacred work. This sacred work happens to be all of our jobs. Those of us that are working in drug rehab, those of us that are working to help those find housing that is so hard.
The upliftment of the spirit, the upliftment of the mind, in tandem with continuing to support and love on to ensure that our brothers and sisters living with HIV are also doing all that they need to do to continue to stay healthy. And most importantly, or equally as important, is having that circle, having that tribe that is elevating and empowering the mind, the body, and the spirit.
And it's kind of what Shirley spoke on, trust. In the setting that I work in, sometimes you want things to move quickly, but it doesn't happen. I like to build those relationships. It takes a while. I get corrected. I get checked. I get told something new every day, but that's what I'm there for. I don't have that lived experience, but with empathy, I try my best to put myself in their shoes, and that's still something I can't do.
What type of work do you feel that the faith community could do to help the public health community and the HIV epidemic?
I think the faith community has a critical role in this work.
How can we do better about how we handle a crisis like this? How can we do better about reaching out to those in our faith community? We have to keep trying. This is a work in progress.
We got to stop limiting ourselves on what we're going to do to be innovative. If a pastor has to get up and make a sermon about it because it's happening in his or her community, do it.
I think that we have to stop focusing so much on what divides us and really focus on what connects us.
We all carry the message of love, and that's the beautiful thing.
I just think we need more pastors to step up and open their doors up when they say the doors of the church is open, it should be open to all of us.
It doesn't mean you stop believing in what you're doing. It doesn't mean you stop doing the work that you're called to do.
I think for us as pastors, it's recognizing my limitations. I know what I'm good at doing. I also know what I'm not good at doing. And if I can partner with someone who can do it better than I can, I partner.
For those leaders who are leading congregations, that's the senior pastor all the way down to the Sunday school teacher of all levels, get some professional development. It is important. There's a lot of tools out there to have conversation around HIV and religion and faith. And if you need that information, just seek for it, but make that part of your professional development. You know, oftentimes as those that preach the gospel, we have to continue to study, and because the trends change, the word of God is going to remain the same, but we got to know how to be able to expound on it where the listeners can be able to eat from it. I will also say for the pastors who do pastoral counseling, have a referral manual that actually have some health disparity referrals in there. You know, as you know, us who do pastoral care, a lot of times we're not licensed to diagnose, but we are commissioned to give the appropriate referral. And as a pastor, we can follow up with that member and to them, their client.
And I think that we have to recognize, and I really come from this from the Black experience, that the essence of any powerful and impactful movement throughout history, at least in the American history experience, has been stemmed out of the Black faith institution, whether it was the Black church or the Black mosque or what have you. And so I think we've got to go back to what we know. And I think that ripple effects also into, you know, non-Black American faith experiences. And so I think we've got to go back to that core of really, again, not worrying about who someone is, not worrying about how someone contracted HIV, but recognizing that we are our brother's keepers. We are our sister's keepers, and that we've got to connect in a way as being spiritual beings, again, that are living this human reality and loving, empowering, and supporting each other in that journey.
So, final words, what would you like the people to hear from your heart?
Be more open-minded to their members, and to certainly be less judgmental in the way they talk to members of their congregations and stuff like that.
I choose to not allow people to stigmatize me because, you know, I am more than my diagnosis. HIV is just a thing to me. It's a regular part of everyday life.
I've learned through the years that I'm normal and I'm loved by God, and that's the thing that kept me going.
Once a year, you're going to open the door, you're going to allow us to come in and test your congregation, but after that, we don't hear from you until World AIDS Day come around again. So every day is World AIDS Day.
It can no longer be taboo. It can no longer be hush hush behind closed doors. Talk about this at your dinner table, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Baptism Day, Lord's Supper, all of that Easter program. Get a speech together. We have to start incorporating this dialogue. It's relevant dialogue. And if the gospel is going to be relevant, then allow that to heal us and not allow a disease or an infection per se to kill us, because again, we are overcomers and this sickness is not unto death. There is a glory behind, because it didn't surprise our Creator.
Until we start these conversations and start having these experiences, we're not going to get far. So understanding that, yes, sex is a word, it's real. We're cringe when we say it. It shouldn't be that way.
You know, sometimes the faith community, particularly in the Black American experience, has gotten a bad rap around this work of really addressing HIV and AIDS and really addressing the issue of stigma. But I know numerous Black faith leaders across this country that are in the trenches, not only within their faith institutions, but also in the broader community, of really working hand in hand with public health leaders and community folks in their community to really address the issue of HIV and AIDS.
We're called. And I think that's the word that I want to use. We're all called to do this work. Continue the work that you do. In every community that you touch, someone sees the work that you do. Someone sees the work that you're doing. and someone will reach out and touch you in some way and join forces with you to give you a lift. And that's what I want you to remember.
Go and tell the story. This is what HIV is about. This is what it's about. We all become ambassadors, and as a result of that, transformation is happening. It's taking place in all of our communities, and we celebrate that. Yet there's still more work to be done, and we commit ourselves to the good work.
My faith, my story.
My faith, my story.
My faith, my story.
Mi historia, mi fe.
My faith, my story.
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 His faith, his story.